3, 2.
Hey, and we're back. I'm your host, VKP, and we're live in Blue Ridge, Georgia, Sycamore Crossing at the Broken Bull, the new and blue store, the Kente Peruvian store, Tupelo Tea. We have some background noise and construction in small town America starting up this morning. We're going to hit the train whistle, and here with me, our regular guest, unless he's traveling. I seen pictures of you with the grandkids here not long ago, last week.
Last week,
Yeah.
Week before last. Yeah.
Week before last. Our guest, Ask the Doc with Dr. William Whaley. Want to thank Georgia Cancer Specialist. Now, before we get started, I don't know if you got here in time. We're going to have a party next week.
That's what I heard.
All right, now I want you to get the word out.
I will. I just sit the text out while I was sitting there.
And you're going to have to go over to the office and schedule just a couple extra minutes to be at the party.
I'll do it.
Let's do that next week, because this is our last one, and I just love this location.
Yeah, I still think we could drag it out another few weeks.
I want to, but there's going to be that one day that the rain will come in.
Yeah, I know. All right.
And she's going to say, I'm cold.
I told you already she's cold. She's already wearing a coat.
She's already wearing a coat.
All right, well, listen, let me tell you, you always have to say, how in the world did he get from here to there? That's what you always say. So
here to there.
Here we are. I'm starting with a helmet.
Okay.
We've been talking about concussion and head injuries,
and
this is not your only helmet. You have two others over there off camera. And I was looking over these helmets, and I was struck right in the middle of my heart. This is made by Riddell. I started playing competitive football in 1948. And when I started playing in high school in 1951, we had leather helmets made by Riddell. So I had that old leather helmet that you've seen on television. That leather helmet gets me into the president back in those days, who was Harry Truman. Now, why did I go to Harry Truman to say happy birthday today?
How did we get from here to there?
From the helmet
to there.
That was Harry Truman was the president. I was wearing a leather helmet.
Okay.
Which Harry Truman gets me to say we need to say happy birthday today.
Okay.
To who?
I don't know.
United States Air Force.
Oh, yes.
Today is the birthday of the Air Force. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, the Air Force was the U.S. Army Air Corps, which began under General Mitchell in 1914 during the First World War, when Snoopy, the character in Peanuts, throws hand grenades out of the bomb. But right now, today, what's going on in the world, there are two groups of people you need to really think about. That's the special operators. So that's Marine Corps, LRPs, Army, Army Delta Force, and of course Navy SEALs. The people who fly them, who are the Air Force helicopter pilots in a group called SOAR, which you don't know much about. And my nurse's son, who's a Delta pilot, but the #1 A-10 pilot in the Air Force, who gets activated and goes and flies that A-10. That's a big old warthog. And people don't think much about the Air Force, because you always hear special operators did this to Obama. I mean, to bin Laden. I was at it, to Obama. They got there on a SOAR helicopter, and that's the Air Force. So just let's say happy birthday to the Air Force today.
I did see that on one of the one of the websites. I did see that, and it just caught me off guard, because I didn't know if I'd forgotten, like, maybe Jane's birthday.
Oh, no.
Hey, I got another. Let's say happy birthday. I got a little nervous.
I got another place to go with it. Got another place to go with it. Now, who was the most famous baseball player in the world at that point in time? Makes a hamburger. There's a candy bar named after him. Babe Ruth. Okay.
Baby Ruth.
All right. Now that takes me to the president.
Wow, you just keep going.
I'm now
You're getting from here to there.
I'm now
We're going to call a segment from here to there.
I'm now at the United Nations.
Oh, no.
Okay. The most famous thing that Babe Ruth did was this.
Yes, he pointed out.
He pointed where he was going to hit the ball.
Exactly.
And he hit the next pitch right there.
Right.
Okay, now that was immediate. So he did this, and within 30 seconds or 2 minutes, there was gratification for the crowd. Our president did that on Tuesday. He didn't point, he hit it. Because he began 2 years ago saying, I'm going to stand up for America. I'm going to put up some boundaries and walls, And these are going to be boundaries and walls, not necessarily the wall in Mexico, but these are boundaries and walls and not little old streaks in the sand that the waves can blow away, or red lines that don't amount to red lines. And he stood up in front of the entire world in prime time in Europe, not at prime time in the United States. His speech was in the morning.
Yeah, 10 a.m.
10 a.m. What time is it in
England
and all across Europe? All the way to the Middle East. It's between 4 and like 9 at night. So that's the prime time for people to see him on television in the rest of the
whole
world.
Know how we
okay,
thought.
all right, yeah. But not only that, he matured it a little bit. It says, I need your help. And it's the right thing to do. He put it in the words of, this is the right thing to do. And you guys need to do your own, we'll do the heavy lifting, but you need to at least do your part of the lifting. And so anyway, that was Babe Ruth. Now that all goes back to
no more funding for countries that hide terrorists, and no more, thing. I could break that speech down, and I couldn't agree with you more that there are things in the world that we do need to be unified or work together. Is that one of the beer deliveries?
That's one of the beer deliveries.
Yeah, it's one of the beer deliveries in downtown Blue Ridge. There are things we do need to work with.
There are moral imperatives. I mean, it says there's a book somewhere that's got about 10 of these moral imperatives, and I've forgotten what book that was. But you don't kill. There's 10 moral imperatives, and when that's what he was doing. He stayed away from the Bible, but he got up and he said, this is a moral imperative. That human rights, and that these are moral imperatives that we need to stick to. Anyway, we didn't need to get.
So I take it you enjoyed the president's UN speech. We'll leave it there.
I did. Well, I will say one more thing.
Right.
That within 48 hours, there was a response from the opposite team, and that was China's banking regulation or banking instructions that they gave out after dark last night, if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't had a chance to check, but I do believe that China instructed their commercial banks to quit doing business with North Korea, and that was about 8 o'clock our time last night.
Trump basically said, you will help us with this, or we'll wipe them off the face of the earth.
Months ago, 30 months ago, whatever, he pointed to where he was going to hit the ball, and he hit the ball there Tuesday. Now, what do you want to know about smell or mammograms or something now?
Well, these questions are, I'm like, why did I get these questions? But I'm going to go with them, okay? What is the different mammogram guidelines? What are the different guidelines? I'm not sure when to begin screening and how often to go. So
okay,
that's
all right. Well,
a big one there.
Okay, now you have just opened Pandora's box. And I have brought some material that I'm going to give to Sam, which she is going to post on your website under the doctor thing. And if you look at this chart, there are about 20 lines about the mammography, and they represent exactly what this questioner is saying. There are so many recommendations, I don't know what to do. So we need to stop and think about who is making the recommendations and what is their motivation. You can clearly say that the motivation of the insurance companies or any groups that are of that type are to make the minimum recommendations to diminish the amount of money spent. Got that?
Yes.
All right. The recommendations that you would call sort of unbiased want to take the hazard-benefit ratio of mammography and balance it to the point where the benefit outweighs the hazard. And then lastly, the manufacturers of mammogram machines, or the people who do the biopsies, they want you to get lots of mammograms so they have lots of income. So here we have 3 groups of recommendations. So the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, they recommend screening every 2 years, starting at age 50, and individualize those discussions between 40 and 49. That's the the least, and don't do them over age 70. Now, the American College of OB/GYN, that's your gynecologist. They recommend beginning at age 40 and doing it every year up to age 60. And then after age 70, maybe do it every year, every 2 years. And most people say stop at age 84. I saw a patient yesterday that's 93 that's healthier than us, and I sent her to get a mammogram. So that's what they mean by individualize. But if you stop and think, 1 out of every 6 or 1 out of every 7 women are going to get breast cancer. The official number is 15 to 19% of the population. And they are reducing the opportunity for that percentage of people to get diagnosed with something that's 100% curable in its early stage. Flip over to the recommendations for immunization for kids. You with me?
Yes.
All right. They recommend that all kids at age 12 get an HPV vaccination. And I've sat here before and I've said I think they should get it. That's because that viral infection is not associated with any illness that those kids are likely to get that they would recognize and prevent, like measles and mumps. It's because it can prevent in their 40s to 60s cancer of the cervix and head and neck cancer related to previous infection with that virus. Well, the incidence of cervix cancer is so low, and the incidence of head and neck cancer is so low that it represents less than 1 in 100. And here they are giving all these kids shots to prevent something that will occur in less than 1 in 100, whereas breast cancer, which is pretty dramatic, is going to occur in 15 to 18% of women, and people say don't do a mammogram because it costs too much. I'm against that. So to answer your question, first of all, if there's a family history of cancer of the breast, if the patient is obese, taking estrogens or whatever, you want to start earlier, you want to do it more frequently. If you've got if your mother had 12 sisters and your grandmother had 12 sisters and nobody in your family's ever had ovarian cancer or breast cancer and nobody's had any cancer, and you're a little skinny woman and you don't drink very much, get a mammogram at age 40. Then individualize that discussion with your doctor about getting other mammograms, but keep getting regular mammograms until at least 70 years of age. And whether the interval should be 1 year or 2 years, I'll let you discuss with your doctor. Now that drives us around to colonoscopy, where we were a few weeks ago. I think you were talking about Ray ordering colonoscopy on somebody, and that's another place that I think we ought to mention that if you turn on the television, the people who make Cologuard, the one that you mail in, they come and they show you, the guy brings the FedEx box or the UPS box to the house, and they say you can collect this and get it. There are so many different screening tests for colon cancer, from what we used to do with a digital rectal and a blood test, to a flexible sigmoidoscopy, which looks at the bottom couple of feet of the colon, to a colonoscopy, which looks at the whole 8 feet of the colon, to this particular test, which is a more sophisticated blood test, to tests that try to find cells and measure genetics. Well, all of those other ones that you see advertised on television are driven by that profit motive of the drug company, not by equivalent sensitivity to the colonoscopy. And they will make you want to think, well, I don't want to drink that gallon of stuff, and I don't want to, that doing this is just as good as going to the trouble of having a real colonoscopy, and the answer it is not. And so the colonoscopy recommendations, and I have that big old chart here, and Sam's going to put these on the website. Everybody believes that you should begin screening for colon cancer at age 50 in this general population. We'll take Jane, since we mentioned her earlier. Her mother is one of a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and I don't remember exactly, but 4 or 5 of them have had colon cancer. Well, that's a different animal. Those people ought to be screened at age 40. And the screening really is another place where you need to sit down with Ray Tidman or sit down with whoever your doctor is, get through your risk factors, how many people in your family have had cancer, and so forth, and then make a decision. Yeah, I'll have one at 50, and then at that one, if it's totally normal, you'll do another one about 5 to 7 years later, and if it's normal, then it'll be 10 years between colon exams. But anyway, we're going to put this up on the website. We're going to let people look at it. And the last thing this drives me to, and if you'll notice when you look at this says grade A evidence, grade C evidence. That's how strong is the evidence. And so when you're looking at this colon and rectal thing, the very last line, and I'll just show you so people know where to look. The U.S. Preventive Science Task Force made a recommendation on aspirin use for primary prevention of cardiovascular disease and colorectal cancer in average risk adults. Now, I've been talking about that it's worth it to start taking a baby aspirin when you get to be about 40 if you don't have ulcer disease and you're not allergic to aspirin and all the little knots, because of its measurable decrease in the amount of colorectal cancer and heart disease. Boom. Finished with that one.
Is ovarian cancer still possible after a hysterectomy?
It's a great question. Most hysterectomies do not include removing the ovaries. So yes, if you had a hysterectomy and your ovaries are in place, obviously you can have ovarian cancer. Second, the ovary is a kissing cousin to the testicle in terms of embryogenesis. And when that little egg is becoming a fetus, there is a strip of material that runs down the backbone. If you've seen these ultrasounds on television where they say a woman who wants to get an abortion should look at an ultrasound of her kid before she does, that strip, which is a gonadal strip, will either become a testicle and descend out of the abdomen into the scrotum, or become an ovary and stay up there next to the uterus. So even when the uterus and the ovaries have been removed, that strip of tissue that way back when you weren't even born yet was potentially a gonad, testicle or ovary, is still there. And there is malignancy of the retroperitoneal gonadal strip that is exactly ovarian cancer and occurs in people whose ovaries have been removed 20 years before. So the simple answers are: one, if your ovaries have been removed with your hysterectomy, the chances of getting ovarian cancer are 0, but the chances of getting the gonadal strip cancer that's exactly like ovarian cancer are real, but they're very low. How's that?
That's good.
All right.
What would make a person smell odors which are not there? They aren't unpleasant, just nothing present to produce the smell.
Now you think,
I don't know about this. I don't know about this question.
Okay, I know that you don't, and I can tell by the way you looked at that question as you think, that sounds like somebody's kooky. This is a kooky question here.
No, I didn't. Right. Well, maybe. Did you think the way I looked at that question?
You did. You looked like this is a kooky question. Okay. This is really not a kooky question. It's an extremely complicated question. And unfortunately, it has a lot of answers. And what's that? That's a 0. It's really got 0 cures. So the mechanism of smell and the mechanism of taste are bound up together. The most common thing that causes these abnormalities of smell begin with things that you think are common. One, if you have a dental abscess or something like that that's in your jaw, and your taste buds are here and your smell buds are there, you can see how you might be able to smell without anything around you except an absolutely empty room, things that would be coming from dental issues, let's just say infection. But the most common ones are very common right now. Our ragweed and our goldenrod pollens are very high. So allergy is number 1. Rhinitis, meaning any type of a cold or whatever, is number 2. Chronic sinus disease, which lots of people have, is number 3. Nasal polyps, which are sort of the result of all of that, are number 4. Now there are other ones that are, you know how you can have mumps and end up with a testicular swelling. or you can have mumps and end up with pancreatitis, and you can even die from it. So a viral infection can affect other organs like testicle and pancreas in mumps, but viral infections that have nothing to do with blowing your nose or coughing can affect the receptors in the nose and receptors in the mouth, and then leave them damaged for a while, so that you have these peculiar effects of either can't smell at all or smell something that's not there. Now that gets you into the kind of the stuff that's common, but the rest of the things that cause you to have these smell or taste things are nutritional inadequacies. For some reason or other, you got this kooky diet and you don't get any copper in your diet or whatever. Toxins, like marijuana, the stuff that's in energy drinks, dietary supplements that you get off the internet that are supposed to help you.
Wonder who you're talking to.
I wonder
Just keep
who
going.
I am. And medicines. So going back to the question, you thought it was crazy, but the common things are common. And so you go back to the allergies, you go back to sinus, you go back to polyps, you go back to those sort of things. And then all the rest of them are less common. And lastly, if you've had a head injury, you can have this that occurs years after the head injury, from the long-term results of what's going on in the brain. And I think you saw yesterday that Boston College released the autopsy of the brain on Hernandez.
Yes.
Hernandez has the worst case of post-traumatic encephalopathy that they've ever seen, and I think they have 300 or 400 brains now. So if he had told you a year before he started shooting people and going nuts that he was smelling stuff that wasn't there, that was could be the result of long-term encephalopathy from concussions. So see, you thought that was a silly question.
No, I didn't really think it was a silly question.
15 minutes of talking.
I didn't think it was really well. I get caught off guard every week by some of the questions, but then after I ask them and you start into explaining them, I'm like, okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, not so dumb.
Well, I don't say that.
No, but you mean
okay.
You think it. That wasn't so dumb at all.
Any final things
I've got a really good one. Yesterday, the American College of OB/GYN, every week we come here, and as you know, in the last couple of months, I've traveled to 3 states where marijuana is legal. I was in Washington State twice in the last 6 weeks. And they took in more money in 2016 on marijuana tax than they did on alcohol tax. And there's literally a marijuana store every 2 blocks in Spokane, Washington, where my brother lives, and that's not a hotbed of pot smoking. I can imagine what San Francisco is like today. But literally just walking from here as far as that restaurant in Spokane, Washington, in the nicest part of town, you would pass 2 or 3 people sitting on the ground smoking pot. Well, this legalizing of marijuana in lots of places has got, last week we talked about women pregnant drinking alcohol.
Yes.
And I said, look, it's gotten to the point where 1 drink or 2 drinks during the entire pregnancy, you shouldn't do it. Well, people think because they've legalized marijuana, well, we can smoke pot. There's a huge reason not to, and the American College of OB/GYN yesterday came out with an official statement based on all the research that the marijuana effect on an unborn fetus in terms of the neurological development is so potentially harmful that you should not smoke pot nor get passive smoke from pot during your pregnancy. I think that's worth people hearing.
Dr. Whaley, I appreciate it. I thank you every Friday morning for this great information. And like I said earlier, now you know we're going to have a party next week. So come in a party mood.
All right, don't anybody forget, Sam's putting up these 2 charts for you on the...
You'll be able to find this segment. You'll be able to find this segment under our community section in the website, FetchYourNews.com community section. And we will have the Ask the Doc video, the segment this morning, plus all this great information, maybe that will be helpful to you in making some decisions, medical decisions. But as we always say, contact your doctor.
Talk to Dr. Stedman or whoever your
Yeah,
doctor is.
call Ray.
Call Ray.
We should put that up. Anyhow, thank you, Georgia Cancer Specialist, for this segment, sponsoring this segment. Thank you, Dr. Whaley. Now, when we come back, we're going to take a brief break. When we come back, we opened our next segment to any candidate for city council or mayor that wanted to come by and say hello. We do have a candidate, but we're going to leave that for you to figure out who on the other side of this break. We do have a candidate. Well, we'll go as far to say, no, we won't. Stay with us.